Welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast. My name is Curtis Wilson, along with my co-host
Brian Siegler. How you doing, buddy?
Buddy, this guy is tired, man.
What you been doing, man?
All right, so Friday, my neighbor, who is a landscape contractor, GNR Landscaping LLC, name is Chris, great guy. Talked to him about getting some mulch a couple weeks ago. He dropped 10 yards of mulch at the house on Friday.
Ooh.
And buddy, me and the wifey, all day, most of the day Saturday, and part of the day today, worked. So I'm a little tired from doing that. Plus, we had our first Little League baseball practice on Saturday as well.
Okay.
So when we get done recording here tonight, I'm going to be going to bed and probably fall asleep in like 5 minutes. What about you, big guy?
Dude, kind of similar, man. We had a pretty much outdoor-based weekend. We did a lot of, a little bit more landscaping than kind of the similar stuff we were working on before with the patio and stuff. Then we had one of Wyatt's classmates, him and his brother and his parents over doing like a little alcoholic punch and a little fruit tray and stuff like that while the kids messed around in the inflatable pool and on the trampoline. And then we went over to our neighbor's house and had some quesadillas and some queso dip that I smoked on the good old Weber in the backyard this afternoon. So it was a pretty full day. But I've been in the sun a lot, so I could really use some sleep myself.
Oh, yeah. Everybody check out Brian's. I don't know if you posted it on Twitter, but you sent me a picture of that queso stuff you were doing, man. And I jokingly said to Brian, dude, we recording tonight? Because you eat all that, you're going to be like, food coma, not going to be able to do anything. Yeah, we did something similar yesterday. Kim's older brother, birthday was this weekend. So we went over to their house and ordered some pizzas, let the kids frolic in the backyard, which was, again, a little more normal type stuff. Not 100%, but more normal. And obviously the baseball stuff's more normal. But overall, solid weekend. Back to the grind tomorrow. So now you back to the office tomorrow, or is that later this week?
We're still holding off. It's probably going to be either later this week or Monday of next week.
Got it.
I've done all the re-onboarding stuff, so now I'm just kind of waiting for the green light.
The re-onboarding. Don't wash your hands constantly. Don't put your fingers in your mouth. Like the common, like you're sitting there like, you mean the common sense stuff every human being that's of age should know? Sure. All right. Well, today what we're going to hit as our main show topic is we're going to do some ACC off-season recaps. Today we're looking at the ones we don't play. So, but before we get into all that, it's been a little while since we have recorded, so definitely some news has come down the pipe. And Brian, let's start with the bad before we get to the good.
It's not all good news, ladies and gentlemen. We had another one jump off the boat, as it were.
But were you really surprised he jumped off the boat, Brian?
We were not. We're talking about Latrell Neville here, and we're talking about a guy that mostly got in the boat because Demetrius Davis was in the boat. And even though we got the, I'm committed to my verbal statement about 3 weeks ago, I was like, I'll take your word for it right now, but I'm going to pretty much say you got 1 foot out the door until I see some more solidifying evidence. So, and unfortunately that never came to pass. And it looks like, he decommitted, and it looks like it seems Nebraska's the team that's really making the biggest push right now, which puts him a little closer to home, but not exactly what you would call his backyard either.
He ain't going to Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU. He's not going to those programs within a 2-3 hour drive, 5 to 6 up in Oklahoma. But But you know what? You got to do what you feel is best for you. You know, I know some people go at the kids pretty hard when they decommit. Yeah, be emotionally invested. But no, again, we don't know everything behind the scenes with this guy. You know, it could have been the DD thing, and other things could have changed in his life that we don't know about. So,
Yeah.
Again, everybody who goes after these kids on Twitter when they decommit, don't. They're 17-year-old kids. Think of yourself as 17-year-old. I'm sure some of you didn't know your head from a hole in the ground and were making decisions. These kids are doing the same. So let's go with that. But Brian, from this, I kind of look at it. I mean, do you think Texas to VT's history?
When we say Texas to VT being history, I think yes, in terms of it being a big splash in every recruiting class or signing 4 or 5 guys in every recruiting class. I think that was overhyped by the fans and overhyped by members of the coaching staff because it was a big deal when we started getting some of these guys in the boat. So I get that, you know, sometimes hype becomes your own worst enemy. And
Yep.
I think that's what happened here is that, you know, everybody saw, you know, we had the commitments from the defensive ends in the 2020 class and then D committing. And then all of a sudden you got Neville in there and about 2 or 3 other guys that were really giving us a serious look in that area. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, there's something behind here. But I think this is going to turn out more like what we do in Florida, especially in like the Delray Beach and Jacksonville area, than some sort of like grand uprootment from Texas and you know, transplanting those guys in Blacksburg. I don't think we're going to see that degree where we got a third of our class made up of these, you know, Texahoma guys. But I think you're going to see, you know, 2 to 3 maybe per class. I think that's a reasonable ask, especially if you're not talking about high profile Texas talent. If you're talking about more like the low 4, high 3 guys that we're kind of looking at already pulling in, like Alec Bryant. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and it's absolutely what the way you put it was. The movement was very hyped to the moon because we got 2 guys in one class. Then we picked up a couple more, and it was like people were just shooting it through the moon. You saw it a ton on social media, but I like.
I think you know. I think some of the coaches did a maybe a little bit premature job of once they saw how it was playing with the fans jumping on that, and I think that created maybe a little bit more hype than was needed. And then, you know, you also got to look at the fact that you had these guys in the boat and you weren't able to keep them. So there's going to be some criticism of the staff there that, you know, if you can get them to commit, why can't you, you know, keep them in the boat?
Well, let me ask this then. Let me ask this because we say, is it, oh man, the coaching staff blew it. Dude, how much do you think the pandemic cost? Or is this just an excuse? Is it like, this is true, we couldn't, like, hey, to see campus to really keep them, like, on our train? Or is it just coaching staff is using, they stink at closing on guys? What do you think? Because, you know my feelings. I think it kind of threw a huge curveball in how we were going to do things starting March. Really, what was going to be the dead period? What dead period was going to start in May normally, right?
Yeah, and I think the big thing is that you weren't able to get. Yeah, just looking at the way some of these commitments have come through, I think we were looking at a major March, April push to get guys in the boat, and I think the pandemic completely threw that for a loop. And I think initially it played in our favor because we already did have good position with a lot of those guys. But I think as time wore on, it became a problem. So I'm not saying that the pandemic is the reason we lost those kids, but I think pandemic definitely played a role in that because it did, you know, we had very positive momentum at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we had about a 4-week lull where kind of nothing happened. And in that nothing happening is when, you know, DD went radio silence. And then obviously we knew that there was going to be some collateral damage from that decommitment just because of how much hype was behind his coming to Virginia Tech and how much hype was behind. Okay, well, and two, you know, I'll put this on the staff a little bit too. Some of it was a little bit too much. Come play with DD. At some point, you can't just hype one guy as being the centerpiece. You got to, build the entire recruiting class, absent of everybody else that you're getting in.
100% on that. 100%. I think it was definitely a factor. I think it was a major factor. But again, they cannot use it as an excuse because it happened to everyone.
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
It should have changed your game plan of how you were going to recruit these guys. You make the point about them really pushing it. DD, we feel that way just from published and stuff like that, but we don't know how the things were behind the scenes. So I don't know how much it was to push for kids to come here to play with them. We definitely feel like Latrell was, but it is what it is. The pandemic is what it is. I think the NCAA is really screwing up right now by continuing to end the dead periods when you've got states reopening. Schools are starting to reopen, and you're just like, oh, no, dead period. And it's like, why, guys? I don't get it. But, I think me and you might tackle that another day. But, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to create some problems with the dead period, keep getting, pushback, because at some point, we're not going to be able to even understand what the recruiting is going to look like because you're going to be back in the season again. So you essentially have what's a almost zero off-season recruiting period, which is a completely different animal, especially rolling right into the early signing period right after the regular season wraps up. I think it's going to be really, really hard, and I think we're going to see some major decommitments and some major guys up for grab that we thought already had a home.
Oh, yeah. I already told you my thought. I think once that thing breaks, I think you're going to have a week where there's going to be 100-plus kids decommit. I think it's going to be that fast and furious because a kid's going to go visit a school and be like, what was I sold? And he's going to leave. Yeah, thanks, coach. Get on his plane. I would text coach real quick. And then say, and then announce on Twitter, I'm decommitting. Like, oops, I think you're going to see that. But, Brian, news isn't all bad, man. Over the last couple weeks here, since me and you last, had a show, we got a European commit from Germany from Serbia by way of Germany, Danijel Miletic.
Yeah, Deutschland to VT.
Deutschland to VT. There we go, big guy. All right, you already checked his tape out because you hit some things you liked. What do you see from this guy, man?
Yeah, I think the big thing that you're looking at here is that he's got a good punch, and I think he's a lot of the tape is showing him at tackle, but I think he's going to be a more natural fit as a guard. Looking at some of his pass sets, it's a little bit shallower than you'd like to see for a tackle, but he moved his feet well. I'm not sure the degree of competition he was going against. Obviously looking at some of the European guys there. But in terms of just having the mechanics and having the size, he's got both of those things. So, hopefully that's something that we can work with. Cause the biggest thing is you can't teach size, and it's nice that he already has a lot of those fundamentals kind of down, in terms of pass pro, which is going to be the bigger part. Because that's the harder thing to teach.
Absolutely. Also, the guy who was working with him that sort of turned him on to us, Paul Alexander, longtime NFL O-line coach. Shout out Sons of Saturday with their interview with him. And he straight up said, if this kid was stateside, he would be a 4-star or maybe a 5-star because of the size. And like you talked about, he's already got a lot of really good technique. We don't know the competition. But, from listening to that interview, and they did a great job with Paul, but Paul tells you, all of those places, they have leagues. So it's obviously not the standard of the NFL. So, again, he's been coached by Paul. He's probably seen it played. He's probably seen the NFL. And it's one of those things where sometimes you just take a risk. And this is one of those classes where you can dice roll. This isn't last year by any means, but because we didn't have many spots last year. This year we basically can go full boat. And it's like take the risk. He's already built. At least him coming in, we don't have to worry about him putting on 30, 40 pounds to play at a collegiate level. He's already 290 pounds. He's already 6'3.5". He's got the body to do it. Let's just see if he can do it.
Yep.
So let's have a little fun here, Brian, before we get to one more sort of serious topic before we hit this topic for today. You followed it closer than I did.
Yes, I did.
Coach
I followed
Doug.
it a lot closer than you did, I think. I was really all over it. So I don't know if you guys know, but Virginia Tech is now football national champions. We have the most recent football national championship in the sport right now. We took down Doug's. We took down Tennessee.
Oh, Jeezy.
They went down.
In the Rose Bowl.
Absolutely, dude.
Hammered them. Absolutely crushed them. 3 scores. It was awesome to see the social media presence. You know, Barstool is the biggest independent brand out there in sports media. They don't care they don't care your take on them.
Nope.
They say what they want to say. Ask Norm Wood what happened to him when he went after him. He got shredded and he gained no followers, but he got tons of hits and he got ratioed to death. But it was fun to see. But
he got a kicker. He got a punter named after him, a digital punter,
which was awesome. I mean, you know, if I could be a butt of a Barstool joke and they name a player after me, would I do it? Yes, heartbeat, yes, because they're hilarious. But the one big thing, man, that disappointed me and you was our social media just didn't push it. It was just like, dude, you're in a dead period of sports. People are following this guy, watching them, 70, 80, 100,000 views, and we get a few tweets out of it versus really, jarring with them.
Yeah, there was no media blitz. We had, the initial clapback by the account, and then, once the game was going on, it looked like we had some sort of thing slapped together to, celebrate the fact that we took the win there. Yep. But there wasn't a whole lot in the lead up. And I think, that's about a 48-hour period that you had to put something together, and just nothing really came out of it. I was really kind of disappointed in what, and just I guess not having fun with it. I mean, I don't think it's going to necessarily move the recruiting needle for us, but it was just something to increase our visibility and, show that our brand can be fun and be in on the joke and things like that. I mean, that's an endearing quality. I mean, I think we had that type of brand already, but we don't show it enough. I think we're very laced up, and I think that's some of the criticism that I think the staff gets and the administration gets, is that sometimes we don't just show our fun side.
It's true. Now I get the staff not wanting to show their fun side, but the administration, this was your opportunity. This was your opportunity for basically the VT football Twitter brand to go out there and have fun with essentially, I think Barstool's at 2.3 million Twitter followers. Big Cat's at 1 million. Doug's is at 90,000. Some of their other guys are in the 500,000s. It's eyes. And people know about Sandman. We're not your Ohio State, your Michigans, but we still in the last 20 years have a national brand. And it's here's your opportunity. Seize upon it. Because what happens if Barstool, and this is just my hypothetical thing, we have fun with Barstool, we screw around with them. Next thing they want to know is say, hey, we'd love to come up for the Penn State game.
Yeah.
For real? There, once again, you're missing an opportunity there. So, but still a lot of fun.
Well, if nothing else, we could have sold some T-shirts off of it.
True. Down goes Doug's,
Yeah.
He stamp on his big head. So
it just felt like a little bit of a missed opportunity. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to make a big deal out of it, but it definitely is an opportunity missed.
Absolutely. Brian, let's hit before we hit our normal thing. The last piece I've got on here I want to touch on is going to be the summer and fall practice calendar.
All right.
If
6 weeks of camp.
Yeah. And that thing got approved this week by the NCAA committee. So it's pretty much unless a lot of people come back against it, which who's going to come back against this? You're looking at 6 weeks of camp. Right now, 25, starting June 1st, 25 calendar days, voluntary virtual activities. Then the summer access. The athletes are going to get 8 hours of weight training, conditioning, film review, no more than 2 hours a week. That's roughly going to be mid-July up until the 23rd of July. And then you're looking at the preseason, what you're calling the 2 extra weeks of camp, Brian. Going to be, pretty much, let's see here, 20 hours a week, 8 hours of weight training, up to 1 hour a day for walkthroughs, 1 hour a day for meetings, 2 days required during this off. This is going to be starting late July into early August, going right into the normal preseason activity. Dude, I read about it. I'm happy this is happening for a couple reasons. One, we miss spring ball. We're getting a chance to get the guys in those meeting rooms and get some live action going on before. And two, it just gets the guys back on campus and starts assimilating quicker, rather than the normal, we're going to do voluntary workouts and then we're going to start camp in August. I think what this shows, this is going to be the model. Because I'm going to tell you, I think those coaches are going to be like, we're going to do this again next year, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, you see some of this usually like the first, those 2 weeks that we're adding here is essentially what you usually get in like the first 3 to 5 days of a spring practice. So you're getting an extra, 2 weeks of that essentially here since you missed that installation period. Now you're not going to get the same, live action and spring game, game time type access, but you are getting a lot of time for that installation of new things, and that's going to be key for us, especially on the defensive side of the ball with some of the things that Jay Ham is going to be bringing to the table that are going to differ from what Bud Foster did. So I'm really hoping that we can take advantage of this time and. You can watch film all day and you can have meetings and you can look at a playbook, but it's, walkthroughs still count. I mean, seeing it happen on the field, even not at full speed or even close to full speed, that's going to help these guys. So I'm really excited that they're adding that in there for our purposes, because I think at least on the defensive side of the ball, we need that time for installation, not just, getting back into, game shape and things like that.
What about the other piece I talked about? Do you think the coaching staffs, the athletic departments are going to push the new 2 week to say, hey, we need this going in because if we have these 2 weeks, we're going to have less strains, less pulled hamstrings, less minor ailments where when we go full bore starting in August, we have these 2 weeks leading up where we're able to do some walkthroughs, we're able to do some physical conditioning. This is going to – essentially it's going to help the student athlete avoid injury during the preseason camp. Do you think they're going to push it and say, we need this every year?
I think they'll push for it. I think they might end up getting 1 week instead of 2, which I think would be okay. Which puts, kids getting back, full bore a week earlier. So you're talking about last 3 to 4 days of July. In most cases, kids showing back up to campus, having a week where you're restricted in what you can do, before you start those true preseason fall camp activities. So I think that would be something that would happen. That's likely. I'm not sure if they're going to get 2 weeks. I think that's something that is probably going to stay in this one pandemic filled year. But I think they'll push for it, and I think they might get 1 week. And I think that would be a good thing for everybody.
Absolutely, 100%. All right, folks. Well, let's get into it here. So today we are doing ACC Roundup, the unseen enemy, the ones we don't play this year. So today what we're going to be doing is talking about some off-season pieces of Clemson, FSU, Wake Forest, NC State, and Syracuse, obviously all over in the Atlantic Division. We're looking at 6 key elements here today. The number of returning starters, their key departures, looking at the 3 most impactful recruiting class rankings, coaching changes, and then the key returning starters, and Brian's favorite, the emerging talent. So, Brian, I mean, is it any doubt who we're going to start with? We're going to start with.
Got to start with Clemson. And I'm going to be honest, Curtis. Clemson is a team that we'll probably play this year because I see us winning the Coastal.
Buddy. All right.
But
so
we're talking regular season here, so I'll say Clemson is not a team we play yet.
Got it. All right. Clemson last year.
All right. So I'm going to run it down this way. So let's start with the graduating guys. So let's just take a moment and reflect on what this graduating class experienced, man. We're talking about seniors that had one home loss in 4 years.
So,
4 ACC titles, 4 college football playoff trips, and 2 national titles.
That's a lot of experience, man.
Jeezy. Jeezy.
Well, I mean,
all right.
So, yeah, I mean, clearly creme de la creme. They are 14-1 last year. They lost national championship. They lost some guys, and I'm sure you're going to key on a few going to be most hurting to them. But overall, look at them. Brian, they're returning 11 starters, both offensively and defensively, which is, believe it or not, you hear that and it's like, it's not terrible. I mean,
it's not terrible considering the amount of talent they are losing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to run down like graduating seniors. So they've got, we'll start with the guys that got drafted. So we're talking Tanner Muse, who drafted in the 3rd round. Kavon Wallace drafted in the 4th. John Simpson drafted in the 4th, and Tremaine Ankrum, drafted in the 7th. So those are the 4 guys from the graduating class that were drafted. But there's a lot of other guys in those graduates that saw a decent amount of playing time. So let's run them down. We got Chad Smith, Gage Cervenka, Denzel Johnson, Patrick Phibbs, J.L. Banks, Steven Sawicki, Sean Pollard, DeAndre Overton, and Brian Dawkins Jr. But we had 3 other guys that departed early in this Clemson team from last year, from 2019.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
And those guys, those are some studs. So we got 1st round talents Isaiah Simmons, linebacker, drafted in the 1st round, and cornerback AJ Terrell, also drafted in the 1st round. And in the 2nd round, wide receiver T. Higgins. Yep. And, those are some big-time players that left early. So, and they were expecting a couple more big-time players to leave early, and they ended up staying. But we'll get to that later. So what do you think about these departures so far, Curtis?
Well, the departures, the big one I see for them is they lost 4 on the offensive line, which is big. But with Clemson, and I'm going to hit on the recruiting rankings in a minute here, they're putting the talent back in. Now, I'm going to ask you this.
Yeah.
Of those 3 big guys, Terrell's a shutdown corner, Higgins, big-bodied wide receiver, jump out of the building, go get the ball from people, and Simmons. Who do you feel is the piece they're going to miss? And luckily for you, you get both sides of the ball, so you get to choose where you feel like they're going to see the most impactful guy leaving.
So that's the big thing. So, when I look at it, I think their offense is probably going to be the hardest to replace, and mainly it's because of those linemen that are departing. Okay. You got 2 big ones in there with Ankrum and Simpson, but you also had Pollard and Cervenka. So those guys played a role as well. So I think that's going to be the hardest thing to replace for them. Is I know they've got a couple guys that I want to talk about here in a little bit coming in and stepping into these roles, but I think the offensive line is going to be the thing to look at the most, because while they keep putting getting guys in. Clemson hasn't always been known for those big-time linemen. And I think the fact that they had a couple of those guys in this class, I think that's going to be an area that might hurt them.
Absolutely, man. Well, Brian, I sit here and I think about it. You really don't worry about them too much because, dude, the recruiting classes have kind of been insane for them. I'm going back to 2017. First of all, of that class, Higgins and Terrell are gone. Oh, did we forget Travis Etienne is returning? That class in 2017 was the number 16 ranked class. You look at 2018, where you see probably this is the year more guys are going to make impacts. They were the number 7, another small class, 17 commits. That was the Trevor class. And then 2019 was 10. So, it's not out of this world. They're in the top 5 every year, but we know the way they recruit. We know the way they look for fits. They've got a lot of good guys on this roster still. I mean, you might see some jumps. I think the Justin Ross thing being out is going to be just as impactful because, you saw what he did when he was a freshman in that national championship game against Alabama. He literally ate them alive as a freshman. So that's the way I kind of see it there. But, Brian, the one other piece I told you I was going to hit on, and I feel like this is big. So before we get into the players, because I know you really want to get into the keys on that, I want to hit the coaching changes because this is big for me. And I don't know if we saw it in those last couple games, but they weren't quite clicking like they were. And Jeff Scott, who was the wide receiver coach, the co-offensive coordinator, he left. He took down at UCF. He's replaced by Tyler Grisham. He takes over the wide receiver role. You talked about it. Grisham's been there a long time. The GA, he did analyst work for him, so he's probably very good with the culture, the playbook, how they like to do things. So that might be a big question. But it's going to be interesting for Tony Elliott because he is now the OC entitled by himself. And although he was known as the overall play caller, I did some research and I found a graphic back from 15. And tell me if you don't find this interesting. And I want to hear your opinion from a guy who coached and played about how it could screw up. You ready to hear it? 2015, it kind of broke down like this. Jeff Scott called the first and second down pass plays along with any third down and long, while Elliott primarily did the first and second down run plays, and he was primarily responsible for running back block protections for blitzes. So let me ask you this, Brian. Tony now has to worry about first and second down passing plays. He has to worry about third and longs, along with all of his other responsibilities. You saw in that game against Ohio State, it took them a while to get going. And you saw against LSU, it looked like they were getting ready to do, and then they just kind of floundered. Now, is that because Jeff was still there helping them out? But tell me what your biggest thing is about him going from that list of responsibilities to now it's all his.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big thing to watch because I think, as you said, something with the passing game just wasn't quite hitting the way it normally does. I think the running game is going to be fine. I think that's a specialty. That's a wheelhouse. But I think acclimating to the feel and the flow of what those passing game is going to look like, both from that perspective and from working Tyler in as the full-time wide receiver coach. It might have just been something where there wasn't enough mesh time between when those decisions were made and then when you had to play the game. So an off season might do that wonders, but that's definitely going to be something to watch because obviously it looked like something wasn't quite jiving by the time they got to the playoffs. And, you needed some heroics from Lawrence in the game against Ohio State. And then, they never quite seemed like they got over the hump or into the groove of the game against LSU. They were playing well, but they were just kind of always at arm's length. And I think you haven't been used to seeing a Clemson team play like that. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get things ironed out over the offseason.
Not at all, man. Not at all. It's going to be very interesting with them. All right, dude. I'm going to throw it to you now. Give me some of your key returning starters for this Clemson Tiger team.
All right, key returning starters. So obviously the big one here we're talking about is going to be Trevor Lawrence. He followed a true freshman campaign of 3,280 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, and a national title with another 3,665 yards, 36 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions as a sophomore. And Clemson was back in the playoff and in the national championship. So, this is a guy that has the it factor, the clutch gene, all those cliche things that people throw out about quarterbacks and how they play. This kid's got it. Deceptively elusive. I know that's probably something that you apply to any white kid with a wiggle. But we saw it against Ohio State, man. I mean, I don't think we knew he was an athlete, but I don't think we knew he had that type of play in him. So I think that was something that kind of stood out from his sophomore campaign. But he's the big guy returning, and he's going to be one of those early Heisman favorites going into this year. But the guy standing either next to him or behind him most times, Travis Etienne, I mean, this was a kid that everybody thought was leaving early and decided to come back for his senior year. And now the entire ACC is sad.
Yes.
Because they've got to face this kid again.
Absolutely, man. Because he was going to be.
This is a Maxwell and Doak Walker semifinalist in 2019, second team All-American and reigning ACC Player of the Year. Yeah. I mean, he's electric, but he's also still a guy that can carry the load. He's not a guy that is going to shy away from contact or is just a guy with some wiggle that can, run away from people either. So he's going to be obviously probably 1B for Trevor Lawrence's 1A in terms of the firepower that they're bringing back. Let's talk about some of the other guys though. Let's talk about Nolan Turner. So defensive player, he's the only returning safety that played some key snaps last year, but he was sixth on the team in tackles in 2019. And he shared the team lead in pass breakup. So he's a guy that can make some plays in the secondary. So he's going to be a guy that you want to watch for. And if we're talking about the last thing I'll talk about here is another offensive weapon that we thought potentially could make the NFL jump, but decided to come back. And that's Amari Rodgers. He's a big time special teams player, but he's also able to make some big plays as a wide receiver for them, which they're going to need now, especially with Justin Ross being out. He's a guy that can, he's got that quickness, elusiveness in the open field. So, having him back is going to be key for them.
All right, Brian. Good number of players right there that we've heard their names. We've seen them on the field. Who's a guy that's going to emerge? Who's a guy in week, how about this? The guy that in October we're going to be talking about on Clemson that maybe we didn't quite see coming or we thought might come, and he did come.
So the guy that I'm going to say this, the guy that they have to have step up is Mac Bockhorst. He's their guard that's probably going to slip into the left guard spot that John Simpson's occupied in 2019. He was primarily a rotational, like the key six man for their line in 2019. He took over for Simpson in, I think it was the FSU game, and he ended up grading out the highest on the team for that game. So I think Simpson went down early in that game, and he ended up grading out pretty high. So, he's got a lot of potential, but, he hasn't seen a whole lot of time. So he's a guy that they're going to need to step up with all those interior linemen departing. Another guy that they're going to really need to step up is going to be Joseph Nyata, and that's 6'3", 215-pound wide receiver. He's going to be the guy that's going to step into the role that T. Higgins had last year.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be the key, and it's going to be key to see what Tyler Grisham can do in developing his talent to be able to step into that role. But, I mean, there's three words that describe this guy. He's big, he's strong, and he's explosive. So that sounds like somebody that might do some damage pretty early on. And another guy that might be kind of impactful but more in a situational role is going to be Brandon Galloway. Didn't play pretty much the whole season last year because of a banned substance suspension. Saw some time in the college football playoff. But, I mean, this kid is 6'4", 240, wide receiver. So I think this is a guy that's going to be a big red zone target for Trevor Lawrence. And he's a guy that they'll probably line up on the inside some and just create some mismatches against linebackers and safeties that just linebackers can't run with them, and the safeties can't outmuscle them or have the height on them. So he's going to create some problems.
All right. So we're going to put a wrap on Clemson there. Needlessly, the Clemson Tigers is, well, let's just say they have things in place that probably will continue to keep them successful. Now, Brian, we're going to move on to the Florida State Seminoles. FSU made a bowl last year, but a lot of other stuff. Yeah. They're returning 10 starters on defense, 7 offensive starters, so a total of 17 starters back. That's a lot from a team that just barely met bowl eligibility, lost in the bowl game, and then a lot of other stuff happened. So, Brian, they had a couple guys drafted, I think. One guy I really wanted for my team, but we didn't take him, but I get it. But who do you see as some of the big, essentially key departures?
When we talk about FSU players, man, we got to start, of course, with Cam Akers.
Oh, yeah.
Drafted in the second round. This kind of was their entire offense last year. It's in some games, man.
It truly was, man.
So, that's the big piece that they're going to have to replace, and they're probably going to end up doing it with some type of committee. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along here, but it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing at that position. But I'm sure you have a lot to talk about for this one because there's been a good deal of turnover with the staff, right?
Oh, buddy, was it? So, yeah, as everybody knows, watching college football last year, Willie Taggart fired midseason. And in the offseason, Florida State, first of all, I would like to see what their boosters checkbook looked like after paying Taggart out because that was a boatload of money he was owed. But they go write a big check for Mike Norvell out of Memphis. Basically, you look at Norvell, he built what Coach Fuente did at Memphis, success, and went 38-15 in his time there. So definitely had success down in the AAC, including a trip to the Cotton Bowl last year. You look at Norvell's offense, and it was described by Ian Boyd as this. It is like a tight end inclusive spread offense. Now, Willie's running his Gulf Coast offense down there, and they're different. Don't get me wrong, they are. But I don't think Mike is going to have as steep as curve as Willie did coming from Jimbo's more pro-style offense. Now, I'm going to tell you something, what Norvell did, Brian. This might be a shocker to you.
Okay.
Listen to how Norvell broke down. First of all, Norvell kept 2 holdovers from Willie's staff. One was Odell Haggins. Odell Haggins has been at FSU forever. Was there with Bobby, there Jimbo. And he held on Duggins, the wide receiver coach. So defensive line and the wide receiver coach. Norvell only brought 2 of his coaches from Memphis. 2.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the other guys, it is there's additional 7 guys that he brought from all over the place, man. And these are guys with D1 D1 position coaches and their backgrounds. So I hate to say this, but when I kind of look at Justin Fuente held on to what? Bud, Charlie, and at that point in time, Torian was still on staff in zone.
Yeah.
He basically brought his entire Memphis staff when he comes, where Mike Norvell is just like, nah, I want these guys who coached the D1. It's pretty wild. Now, for Norvell, he's also talent, man. Here are these numbers. Team class, so essentially the senior class this year, they were the number 6 rated 247 recruiting class. Okay. The 2018 class was 11, and 2019 class was 18. That was after the whole Jimbo fire and Willie coming in and everything. So he's got some talent, and I'm going to be interested to see how it works down there. If there's going to be any growing pains the first year, but you look how he built his coaching staff. He wasn't going with familiarity. A couple guys he coached with, but he was going with D1 proven guys, and I kind of like that move by him. Now,
that's going to be interesting dynamic to see how those guys mesh because we obviously know that the talent is there. We know these guys can coach, but just because guys can coach doesn't mean it's going to be a good fit and that things are going to work together the way that they should on paper. Everything looks good on paper for what they can do there, especially with Norvell at the helm. On paper, that staff looks good. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward and mesh as the season goes along, especially those first couple hard games that they'll get to in their schedule. I don't think they're going to have any problem with some of the lower level competition, but once they start getting to some of the harder teams on the schedule, it'll be interesting to see how they adjust.
Absolutely. All right, dude, tell me who's their keys coming back.
All right. So we've got a few big ones here. We'll start with the obvious one, Marvin Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
Defensive lineman. This guy is a monster. This guy is likely a first-round draft pick.
He was going to be this year.
He was going to be this year, and Norvell was able to get him to come back and try to start that rebuild, and I think it's paying dividends. I mean, we've seen him as a leader. I know that it did cause some headaches in the locker room, but I think once they finally got on the same page, I think it seems like they're moving forward with some of the things there. So credit to him for both speaking out, but also stepping up and being a leader and let his voice be heard and moving past it, once they came to a determination of how to do that. So credit to him, and I think he's going to be a dynamic player this year. So look for big things for him. Talk about some other guys, Tamori and Terry, wide receiver. Other than Cam, this was the rest of the offense pretty much. I mean, we're talking about a guy that had 1,200 yards receiving and 9 touchdowns in 2019. So when the ball was moving through the air, more than likely it was going Terry's way.
Oh, yeah.
And, lastly, I'm going to say this on the defensive side of the ball. We're looking at Emmett Rice, the linebacker. He had 72 tackles as a junior last year, and the guy was all over the field making plays. So I think you're going to see a lot more coming out of him this year, being able to step into a really big leadership role in this rebuild behind Wilson there. So I think that's going to be big for this team because they're areas of their defense have looked good, but they've been just so inconsistent with being able to stop the ball in the back part of outside of the defensive line. They've struggled to stop offensive moving on them, and they've struggled to put up consistent points. So we'll see if that can change. So that's the big play guys. Now, if we're talking about guys that might step into a more key role this year, there's going to be several of them, and a lot of them are coming from other places. Let's talk about the big one first. So we're talking about Devontae Love Taylor, the FIU transfer. What's been the most glaring issue with Florida State in recent years, offensively?
Offensive line. They've been literally, it's been just a mess to watch them on television. It's just
it's amazing that Akers was able to do what he did with that offensive line, but even more so, their pass pro has been horrendous. And I'm hoping, for their sake at least, that this guy's going to be able to step in and make some big time contributions for them. If we're talking about Cam Akers replacements, we're talking about a couple more guys that are coming from other places. So they picked up Jashawn Corbin from Texas A&M that probably looks to get a lot of snaps this year. JUCO transfer LaDamian Webb. And they've got a couple guys that are kind of the flex type players, Corey Wren and Ja'Kai Douglas, that are probably going to look to make some noise as well. So those are the guys in terms of replacing the production of Cam Akers that might, step up and do some big things. And the last guy I have here is DJ Matthews. He's a wide receiver. He had 36 catches, 335 yards, and 3 touchdowns last year. So respectable numbers, but you're going to need to see him probably take another step this year if they're going to have some success. So look for him to be a guy that if you want a guy that's going to step up and take them to the next level, he's probably going to be the one that's going to make the most strides.
Awesome. One name I didn't hear in that, Brian, which I'm very interesting to me, was Khalil Lawborn. thought you might be seeing him as the next Cam Akers, but I guess from your research, you're feeling like maybe he doesn't fit in Norvell's systems. But I guess time will tell with that, right?
Yeah, I think he's probably going to see some time, but I don't know what that's going to look like yet.
Okay.
Everything I'm reading is that they're looking at some of these guys that are coming in to really step into key roles. So I'm not sure if that means that, he's kind of been passed on the depth chart in terms of what Norvell is looking for, or if it's just production-wise, looking at the tape, he doesn't quite, cut the mustard, as it were. So I guess time will tell in terms of if he can climb back into the role to be, 1A or 1B in this offense. But I think the Seminoles are looking at some of these guys they've got in the portal, and through the JUCO transfer, I think they're going to look at those guys to make some different type of plays for them.
Absolutely, man. All right, Brian, let's move on. One of my personal favorite ACC teams that aren't the Hokies, the Dave Clawson-led Wake Forest Demon Deacons, coming off an 8-5 season last year, returning 5 offensive starters, 7 on defense. For a team like Wake Forest, that is not a lot, man. But give me a couple guys that we're going to really see missing on the field. I know one of them, but I feel like there's one other guy too.
All right, so elephant in the room, Jamie Newman is transferred to Georgia, so we're definitely not going to see him on the field for Wake Forest this year. We got a couple other guys we're talking about. The big one for me is going to be a couple guys that ended up in the draft. We're talking about Justin Herron, offensive lineman. He was a 6th-round draft pick. And Justin Strad, linebacker. He was a 5th-round draft pick. So those are the guys that are the key departures. The last 2 are going to be graduating seniors, and obviously, Jamie Newman transferring to Georgia. He's still got some time left to play football, but those guys are going to be the ones that are missed the most on this team.
Yeah. Now, Wake Forest did, make some coaching changes this year. Kind of interestingly, after coming off a solid 8-5 year, although they waned in the end there. Paul Williams is now their secondary coach. He's been a veteran of 20-plus years, including a stop during the Al Golden era down at Miami.
Oh.
Yeah. Ryan Crawford is he was the cornerbacks coach, but he is moving to an assistant special teams coach and a nickel coach. Now, he previously had been the special teams coach at Harvard before he came down to Wake. Almost maybe seems he was not in the right position coaching corners. Let's get him to something he knows better. They've hired Greg Jones as their linebacker coach. He had been with them for a little while doing some off-field stuff, and they let go of Brad Sherrod. So made some changes, but not anything drastic. It looks like, if anything, the Crawford move was to more, he's better at doing this. We're bringing in a really veteran guy in the secondary. And then the Greg Jones thing, I'd like to see – I kind of feel for Sherrod because he did have a good linebacker. Jones is going to walk in with losing one of their better players. But, dude, they're not – it's Wake. They don't get a lot of talent. 2017, 68th ranked recruiting class. 2018, the 64th ranked. 2019, the 58th ranked. So – in lieu of all those things, and I know they're returning a couple pretty good players where they might surprise a few people, this could be one of those down years at Wake. And, for me, who is coming back that you see could, if they make a bowl, would be really impressive?
Well, when we start with some of the key returners, we got to start with, the dude, Sage Surratt. He's one of the best receivers in the country, and he was making his case for the best receiver in the country until he got injured against Virginia Tech last year.
Yes, he did.
This guy can do it all. Big body, but he can run by you. He was 3rd-team All-American by Athlon even after the injury. First-team All-ACC wide receiver after the injury. This guy was out there putting up some big-time numbers for them. But we also got to look at a few other guys. Primarily these guys are going to be defensive players. So we're looking at Ryan Smenda. He started all 13 games as a sophomore last year at linebacker, and he led the team with 81 tackles and was second on the team in tackles for loss with 7. and he recorded double-digit tackles against Virginia Tech and Duke. So he was pretty much one of their tackling machine out there, especially for a guy stepping into a big role as a sophomore. And I'm going to go with this is going to hurt the Hokies a little bit here.
Oh, man.
But the next two key returners we're looking at are both Virginia natives. Trey Rucker from Fairfax. He had 9 starts last year as a freshman. He's 4th on the team in tackles, and he's stepping in as a day 1 starter, after taking on that role last year due to injuries. And the big veteran guy here, the redshirt senior, Carlos Basham from Roanoke.
Boogie.
Yeah. Walter Camp, preseason All-American, first team All-ACC in 2019, 11 sacks and 61 quarterback pressures. Also had 3 forced fumbles. I mean, he's the dude. He's the dude, and he was in our backyard, and he's playing for Wake. I know Wake is, geographically still pretty damn close to Roanoke, but that one still hurts.
It does. It hurts a lot, man. All right.
And I got a couple of emerging players I want to talk about here, though.
Yeah, I got a feeling I know one of them, but who's your emerging guys for Wake?
All right, so it's got, number one, it's got to be Sam Hartman, because if Sam Hartman is not an emerging player, then they are going to have a rough go of it.
Oh, they're going to have such a rough go with Sam Hartman as an emerging player.
Now, he played a lot in 2018, so, I mean,
he did.
There's some history there. You've seen that he can do the job. Now, the question is, has he taken any, key steps, playing behind Newman last year, where you can come in and say, okay, well, he's going to make some noise now. But he's got a good game, and I think he's got some of at least with Surratt, some wide receiver talent, but most of their wide receivers are also big guys. So I think that's going to help a guy that's stepping into this type of role. He's got big guys to throw to. So I think that's going to, soften that landing a little bit. Speaking of guys he's throwing to that need to emerge, Donovan Green. He showed a lot of chemistry with Hartman, starting 4 games in his redshirt campaign last year as a freshman. So he played in 4 games, based on NCAA rules, but one of those games was Syracuse, and he had 7 catches for 172 yards, including a 75-yard touchdown. So the kid can make some plays, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do with a full run of games this year, especially with Hartman pulling the trigger, who happened to be pulling the trigger when he had most of those catches in that Syracuse game. So it'll be interesting, but as we're moving forward, looking at Kenneth Walker at running back for them, that's going to be another key to look at this year. Played in all 13 games as a freshman and had 2 100-yard games. And he led the team in rushing in 3 of the games last season. So he was a pretty key role, even though he was stepping in as a freshman last year. Kind of similar to, what Keyshawn King did for us, except not quite as explosive as King. Terrence Davis, he's going to be the Maryland transfer, plays the interior line at Wake now. It'll be interesting to see how they work him in, because Wake is returning all of their interior linemen this year. So I'm wondering if some of those guys don't shuffle around to make some room for Davis to slip in there. But that could help them shore up things a little bit as they look to replace a couple of their offensive linemen.
Absolutely. And, Brian, too, they might be taking a look at him, even regardless of size-wise, with collegiate-level tackles, somebody kicking the outside that was on the inside, Davis kicking to the outside. I think Wake's going to lean a lot on their defense this year if they do make a bowl. So a couple of those guys you mentioned is going to be very key for them. All right, let's move down the road a little bit to the east. Let's go to NC State. Now, NC State, not a good season last year. They're worse under Dave Dorn, 4-8. But they do have some returning players. 10 players coming back on offense, 6 players coming back on defense. Now, Brian, they did lose 3 starters on the defensive line, and a couple of them I'm sure you're going to be talking about right now.
All right, so lost Latrell Murchison. He was taken in the 5th round by the Tennessee Titans, so that's a big loss. And then also had another guy right there on the defensive line, James Smith-Williams, drafted in the 7th round by the Redskins. So that's 2 guys off of a defensive line that are now playing in the NFL. So that's going to be really, really hard to fill those shoes.
It absolutely is, man. And it's going to be tough for them. Clearly, with what happened last year for NC State, Dave Dorn, I think officially is on the hot seat, and he made some coaching changes like he was on the hot seat. Big thing, he brought in Tim Beck, new offensive coordinator, quarterback coached. The co-offensive coordinators from last year are still on the team. George McDonald is now only doing wide receivers. The other, Kurt Roper, is only doing a running backs coach. They did hire Joe DeForest as a safety from USC. So new safety coach on defense. Freddie Autry. Lindsey, he comes in a nickel coach from North Carolina Central. He did have a stop at Ole Miss in 2018, so some D1 experience. Also, it looks like some local ties there to the Triangle. And, well, the last two, Brian, I think we're super familiar with. I don't know why, but these guys coach for the Hokies. Brian Mitchell, the cornerback coach, let go by Virginia Tech, lands on his feet down in Raleigh. And obviously the one that still stings a lot of Hokies fans, longtime defensive line coach Charlie Wiles, let go. And for Charlie, it made a ton of sense. He's always recruited down in North Carolina. So we're probably going to have some fights with him over some players in the future.
You're right.
But overall, right. I think you see Dorn know I need to make some changes on offense, so we've got to score more points. But he's bringing in some really solid defensive players too, because he knows that if he screws up this year, they're probably going to let him go. And he has some decent recruiting classes, 53 from 2017, 26 from 2018, and 32 from 2019. So there are some talent in there, but I think Dorn knows the seat's on fire. I got to bring in guys I think can get us there now, not later. And then you see some of those guys coming back, Brian. Who do you think's going to hopefully potentially save Dave Dorn's job?
Well, I've got 5 guys that I've kind of targeted, both that some of them returning, some of them going to be new, that I want to kind of talk about a little bit here. But the big one that's we weren't able to see last year that we're going to get to see this year because of NCAA rules is linebacker Levi Jones. So he had to sit last year, transfer from USC. But by all accounts, he's getting rave reviews. So, but apparently put on a bunch of muscle, and he was scout team player of the year in the year he had to sit out there. So he's a guy that apparently is a good locker room guy, good in the weight room, and seems to have the ability to translate that to the field. So he's a guy to keep an eye on, both in terms of big playability and just being able to rack up some tackles. So the Wolfpack are deep at linebacker, but it seems like he has already kind of worked his way into that guy and also being kind of a hybrid pass rusher for them. So keep an eye on Levi Jones there. Shoring up that offensive line is going to be key, and it looks like Akeem Ekwonu is going to be the guy that's going to potentially step in and help out there. It looks like he was battling some injuries. Eventually, he got put into left tackle last year at one point once he worked through those injuries and seemed to do pretty well. So I think he's kind of a guy that has already shown some promise, but he hasn't really even reached his ceiling yet, just being a freshman last year. So sophomore tackle Ekwonu is going to be a guy to keep an eye on. Let's also look at the defensive end, Jeffrey Gunter. We talked about all those guys departing on the defensive line. This is a guy that apparently also had to sit out last season and did a lot of good stuff on the scout team, just like Jones. So I think he's a guy that looks to, if not, step into a starting role, but he's definitely going to be a guy that's going to be rushing the passer and getting off the edge for them. Looks like he was at Coastal Carolina in 2018, so he's kind of following the Brock path here. Coastal 2018, sitting out 2019, and stepping into a key role in 2020. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. And the one other one I want to focus on here is a guy that we really don't know a whole lot about, but he's kind of looked at as the savior of the offense. And that's freshman wide receiver Porter Rooks. They really were very, very poor at the wide receiver position last year. And based on this guy's tape and everything, they are really, really excited to see what he can do because they think he can actually have play level ability. He had rolled early, so he's got the maturity and he's got the skill level. So I think they're looking at him to be an instant impact guy and to be the guy that can make some big plays for them right out the gate, despite just being
absolutely.
a freshman.
I mean, pretty high 4-star guy. So it sounds like he is expected to be not only, one of the key contributors, but it sounds like an emerging talent on your end, Brian.
Yeah, he's kind of pulling double duty there. He's both an emerging talent and a guy they're looking to be a playmaker for them right out the gate.
And for them last year, too, they were struck by a lot of injuries, so it definitely didn't help as many different players as they had to go 4-8. But still, you're required to win football games, and whoever's there is there. You're supposed to win. And maybe that was something that Doran saw with, some of the coaching stuff I saw where certain coaches weren't getting the job done, and he was like, I don't feel like going back and coaching at a lower level. I'm going to fire some people. So, yeah. All right, Brian. Well, let's move on to our last group here, the mighty Syracuse Orange with Dino Babers. The mighty Syracuse Orange with Dino Babers, 5-7 last year. Now, they're returning 11 starters, 4 on defense, 7 on offense. But, man, they ain't Clemson. Coming with 2017 recruiting ranks of 2017, 54, 2018, 51, and 2019, 56. And, Brian, did they have any really key losses that might make them even worse than the 5-7 last year?
Yeah, the big one we're going to talk about is Alton Robinson. Now that's a guy that was making plays all over the field for them last year, and I think that he's going to be the guy that they're missing the most going into this year. We're also looking at they lost bunch of defensive line talent that were graduating this year. We've got Kendall Coleman and McKinley Williams and Kenneth Ruff as well. So we're looking at a bunch of guys on the defensive line that were leaving due to graduation and the NFL. So they're going to have a hard time replacing that talent because that's a lot of depth to go in one season. All right, Curtis, so I'm going to throw this to you. So they were 5-7 last year. Did they make any big changes?
Oh, they made several changes, big guy. They first started brand new defensive coordinator, Tony White, coming from Zona State with Herm. The previous defensive coordinator, Brian Ward, was fired after he gave up 58 to Boston College last year. Yeah, the way BC was last year, you give up 58, you're probably not going to have a job, unfortunately. Now, Tony White actually is coming out. He was with Herm, but he was multiple years under Rocky Long out at San Diego State. So comes from a really good defensive pedigree type program. And you're probably going to see Syracuse start running a 3-3-5 base this year. So a little change up there. Now, they also got a new offensive coordinator.
Okay.
So, again, I think Dino's feeling the hot seat like Dave Doran, man. So new OC, Sterling Gilbert from McNeese State. He had actually worked with Dino Babers when Dino was at Eastern Illinois and Bowling Green. Now, when he was at Eastern Illinois, he was named the FCS Coordinator of the Year. He was essentially coordinating one of my favorite NFL players right now, Jimmy Garoppolo. And Garoppolo won the Walter Payton that year, so he clearly had a guy with some talent playing at that level. So clearly he got Jimmy drafted. So there's some stuff behind this guy, Sterling Gilbert. Now the former offensive coordinator, Mike Lynch, stayed on staff. He is now the running backs coach. So Dino didn't go as deep as Dorn by getting rid of a lot of position coaches. To me, it seemed like he knew it was time for a change in philosophy. And by doing that, I'm thinking about who's coming back. Who you think could benefit, Brian, from the changes to the staffs here?
Well, I think the biggest thing you're going to see is, are we going to see a step forward for Tommy DeVito? That's the big thing is that, last year he had 2,360 yards. So not bad, not great. 19 touchdowns, 63% completion percentage, only 5 interceptions. So didn't turn the ball over very much, but are we going to see him take a step forward in this offense? The key contributor that we need to see take a big step forward is going to be his primary target, which is going to be Taj Harris. Yeah, this is a guy that had 37 receptions, 559 receiving yards, only 2 touchdowns last year. And that's the big thing I think we want to see improve maybe for DeVito is getting more touchdowns. I like the interception numbers, but 19 touchdowns seems fairly low, along with only under 2,500 passing yards. I'd like to see them improve in that area if they're going to take another step forward. But what could help with that is a guy like Matthew Bergeron stepping up and being kind of a big-time player for that offensive line, which was absolutely one of their weak spots last year. I think he had, 20 knockdown blocks last year and was freshman All-America, so definitely a guy that can play. But he's going to be asked to step onto a more leadership role, I think, along the offensive line this year, as they start to get better. So I think offensive side of the ball, those are the 3 guys that are going to be key to see if Syracuse can take a step forward and get back to bowl eligibility.
Very nice. Any emerging guys from the Syracuse team? Again, it's not a lot of highly ranked guys based on where their recruiting is, but is there anybody that stuck out there and said, that guy right there might pop this year?
So, I mean, obviously we've talked about, DeVito taking the next step here. But if we're looking for maybe like a running back to take a lead role, I think they're going to go with the junior tandem of, replacing Mo Neal. He was their lead rusher last year, but they've got Jarvion Howard and Abdul Adams. So I think those are going to be the 2 guys that are going to handle the workload from a rushing perspective. So look for them to be key contributors coming into this thing for this season. But also their pass rush takes a big, big hit. We talked about Kendall Coleman. We talked about Alton Robinson. Other guys left like Lakeem Williams. So that's going to be the biggest part to replace. And I think Michael Jones is going to be one of the guys to look to step in, but also Tyrell Richards. So keep an eye on those 2 guys.
Very nice. You don't know how bad when you said Mike Jones. I just wanted to scream Mike Jones from the hip-hop artist back in our younger days. All right, guys. Mike Jones. All right, guys. So that does wrap up this portion. These are teams we don't play. So what we want to ask you guys on Twitter today is this. What team of these 5 do you wish we played in the regular season this year? I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I'd like to play Wake Forest again because I think they are going to be on the struggle bus as much as I love Clawson. Brian, what about you?
I wouldn't mind playing Syracuse as long as we weren't in the damn carrier.
That's true, but, oh, man, I hate that place. I'm just going to leave it at that. All right, guys. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner Podcast. I am Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian
Follow us
Siegler
on Twitter, Facebook. Subscribe for your podcast on your favorite source, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We always let our friend and classmate Jason Long play us out. Catch him on Spotify and Apple Music. Thank you for listening. And as always, let's go.
Hokie.